Ladies and gentlemen, hey, hi, how you doing? Welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for stopping by. First things first, happy holidays, Merry Christmas. Hopefully you guys are all having a fantastic time with your friends or family. Appreciate you so much for tuning in to today's video. At this point in time in Warzone Pacific, we've had a good amount of time to actually go in and test and use a lot of the different attachments, specifically when it comes to the Vanguard weapons. That's what we want to focus on here today, because obviously having 10 attachments per weapon is a pretty big deal. Class setups could be a little bit overwhelming when it comes down to it. So today I wanted to focus on the best attachments in every single category that we have, like I said, specifically for the Vanguard weapons. So as we go through it all, if you enjoy the video at any point, or if you find it helpful, let me know by dropping a like on it. Would be seriously appreciated. And of course, if you're new to the channel, or if you have not already subscribed, this is the best place to be for everything going on in COD, between news, updates, loadouts, tips. It is all right here each and every single day, and we are getting super close to 800,000 subs. We are less than 4,000 away at this point. It'd be awesome if we could hit that before the end of the year, so feel free to subscribe with your notifications turned on. That way you can always stay up to date with everything. Also, all the way until the end of the year, Gamer Advantage is doing their huge holiday sales, so now is the best time to pick up a new pair of glasses if you haven't already. They offer prescription or regular lenses, and code WhosImmortal gets you 20% off your order instead of the usual 10%. All right, so we're here in the Gunsmith, we're on the BREN, for instance, here, but a lot of this is going to apply to any given weapon in the game, right? Because a lot of the attachments are very similar with a few exceptions, primarily when it comes down to the barrel, the magazine, and then also a couple of the perks. There's a little bit different between various weapons, and we'll talk about some of the more ideal ones when we get to those. But first things first, let's talk about the muzzles here. Honestly, I feel like it's a very clear choice. Pretty much for any ranged weapon that you're using, ironically, you want to go for the Mercury silencer. Now, it's a bit ironic because obviously this does decrease the damage range a little bit. However, when you're looking at suppressors or silencers, obviously we want to be using this because we want to stay off the radar, right? You don't want to have your red dot showing up because that's a dead giveaway as to where you are. It's going to get you third partied. It's going to get you hunted down when you don't want that to happen. And your only choices on pretty much every single gun is the Mercury silencer or the MX silencer. Sometimes it's also called like the M1929 silencer. Basically, one increases your accuracy, one increases your recoil control, one hurts your range, one hurts your ADS. However, as we know, with the whole removal of bloom, this accuracy increasing silencer is almost useless. So for that reason, Mercury is pretty much the best choice on every single ranged weapon you want to be using, and also some close range ones unless you want to go for the recoil booster. And really in this case, I'd only be using this on weapons that have a slightly slower fire rate. So we're talking the MP40, the Owen gun, for instance. That's where I'd use this, but it can be very useful in certain scenarios. So really when it comes down to it, for the muzzle, your best choices are the Mercury silencer and the recoil booster. Now for barrels, this is where things are drastically different from weapon to weapon. Here on the BREN, you got some really cool, unique ones, like the Royal barrel here. It gives you better control. The accuracy is a bonus there, but obviously, as we know, it doesn't really do much with the no bloom feature. Better velocity. Then also the best part about this one is the fact that damage does not diminish over range. There is no damage drop off. That's a huge pro to have, but obviously that's a very rare pro to have as well. It's not on every single barrel in the game. Most barrels you see are a little bit more like this, like the Scepter barrel, which offer better control and better accuracy, maybe some increased flinch resistance. That more so is one of the ones you want to be looking out for, or really anything that's going to increase your damage range and your control. I know, for instance, the STG also has a barrel. I think it's the 760mm barrel that is specifically built for better range and better control and better accuracy as well. Those are the barrels you want to be using on any ranged weapon when it comes down to it. And honestly, the same can even be said for a lot of the SMGs. While obviously you're focusing more on close range fights for those, still having a barrel that's going to increase your control is something that's very ideal in the current meta right now, especially the Vanguard weapons, which do have a little bit more noticeable recoil than quite a few other Cold War or Modern Warfare guns. So when it comes down to the barrel, unless you have a very specific one like the Royal one here, you're always looking for something that's going to give you better control, better range, and or better velocity. Now for the optics, there's a surprisingly solid amount of choices here, and there's a lot of personal preference that is factored into this, but when it comes down to it, the stats don't lie. There are a lot of optics in Warzone right now for Vanguard weapons that offer a lot of recoil control, and that's primarily what we're looking for here, obviously with a combination of decent visibility as well. So the G16 2.5 times is perfect for some medium range and some long range fights. It also gives you better control as well, so that's definitely one you want to look into. Slate reflector is perfect for any SMGs you don't like the iron sights on, or any close range weapon, 0 to 30 meter fights. Slate reflector is going to be that basic red dot and perfect for that. So two options there are great. The 4 times flip actually has some of the best control in the entire game. So if you're looking for a sight that's going to reduce a lot of your visual recoil and general weapon recoil, the 4x flip is a pretty solid choice. Moving on down though, this is my personal favorite, the M38/Slate 2.5x custom. Again, this is going to end up reducing a lot of your recoil, and it's also a very clean looking sight. You can toggle it back and forth between a basic red dot, then also the 2.5x optic. So that's another great choice. I see a lot of players also running the 3.5x rifle scope. This is another pretty popular one for recoil control. Then also the SVT 3 to 6x. You're never really using the 6x on it because your visual bounce is going to be a lot more noticeable, but the 3x on this is very VOK 3x T-pose-esque, so it's a clean sight. Also does help with some control as well when it comes down to it. Those are the main ones though. 3 to 6x, 3.5x, obviously the G16 2.5x, the Slate 2.5x, and the Slate reflector. When it comes to the stocks, depending on what weapon you're using, this will vary a bit. Basically, for any, medium to long range weapons, you want to be going for a stock that's going to give you better control and better aiming stability. Most will have a similar stat line to the Queen's Model 11 BH1 here, where it's better accuracy, better flinch, but you lose some movement speed and some ADS. That's perfect for some of those medium and long range fights. Padded is also usually good in a lot of cases because it's going to increase your recoil during sustained fire. Those are also great choices as well. Basically, if you're using a ranged weapon, you want that stock that's going to increase your control. That's what you're looking for the most there. However, if you're using an SMG, that's where things are a little bit different. Let's go over to the Type 100, for instance. Here, we want to be using any stock that's going to increase our mobility. So the skeletal is a great choice for pretty much every sub in the game. Better sprint to fire, better movement speed. That's going to be ideal for an SMG setup. So the stocks, you just got to pay attention to where you're going to be using a weapon. If it's up close, you want mobility. If it's over range, you want control. Now for the underbarrel, this is pretty much a universal thing, maybe with the exception of like shotguns and snipers. There, you don't really need these as much, but for any main primary rifle, SMG, LMG, whatever the case may be, you got 3 really good choices here, unless you're trying to build for mobility, in which case there you're only looking at the pistol grip or the skeletal underbarrel. Better ADS on the skeletal. If you want a faster ADS, that's very straightforward. If you want a better sprint to fire, go for the pistol grip. I think this is what most players will probably want for an SMG. But if you're looking for control, it is between the Carver foregrip, the Strife angled, then also the hand stop. Now for just general recoil control, Carver foregrip is going to give you the best results there. It's going to reduce recoil the most when it comes down to it on the vast majority of weapons. The hand stop is also going to do it with a little bit less cons here. Obviously, the Carver is going to hurt your ADS a little bit. Hand stop does not really hurt that, but you're getting slightly less control out of that. So just take that into consideration. Then when it comes to horizontal recoil control, there are some weapons that have a little bit of left to right bounce. That's where Strife angled would come into play a little bit more, according to some of the tests that have been done, I think, through JGOD and then also true game data. But really, the Strife angled, Carver, and hand stop are your best bets there. Like I said, unless you're building for speed, in which case the pistol grip is usually going to be your best friend. Now, honestly, magazines are probably the toughest choice when it comes to what you want to be using on any given weapon, because there's a lot of factors in play, right? In some cases, you want to be going for a magazine that offers better damage and better velocity and better range. Like on the bar, for instance, the 40-round BMG is a great choice. However, with those magazines also comes greater risks. You have worse control, worse movement speed, worse ADS, worse fire rate in a lot of cases, which for some weapons is not going to work. While it does work here on the BREN, for instance, on the STG, the visual recoil with the damage increasing mags there just is not super ideal. On the MP40, you're not getting the most out of the gun using the damage increasing rounds. In those cases, sometimes it's better to go for the damage decreasing rounds, but they increase your control a ton. You also get a better fire rate, and in turn, it doesn't seem like the TTK is drastically different despite doing less damage, because you're landing more shots with the more accurate rounds because it's easier to trace players and land shots on a target. So in a lot of cases, I've found the damage decreasing rounds are way more convenient to run. This is what I'm running on my BREN, on my MP40, for instance. On a lot of my primaries, this is my go-to because that increased control over range is actually super ideal. Same thing on like the Cooper Carbine, for instance. You're getting a lot of pros out of this, even though they might seem like not the best choice off the rip. So I definitely recommend experimenting around with these. Or in some cases, like on the STG, I just run a basic extended mag. I think it's the 50-round mag or whatever the case may be, or the 60-round mag. It's just very basic, and extended mag works just fine, especially if you're able to pair that with something like Vital and increase that torso damage. Even without the cal upgrade, that's going to work very, very well. So in most cases, I'd recommend doing either the recoil and fire rate and ADS increasing rounds, or just a basic extended mag. In very few cases, you'll go for the damage increasing, but most times you want to play it safe and go for the others. Now, ammunition, I feel like, again, is a very straightforward one. You got 3 choices when it comes down to it. For ranged weapons, every single time, snipers, rifles, LMGs, whatever it may be, if you're using a gun for medium and long range, lengthened. The 30% increased bullet velocity is massively massively beneficial. Bullet velocity is huge in long range fights, so lengthened is the no-brainer choice. Now, if you're using anything for close range, SMGs or anything else, then it's a difference between incendiary and hollow point, and it sort of comes down to what you prefer more. When it comes down to it, I think statistically incendiary is more beneficial if you're consistently landing shots, because it's going to hinder the enemies from healing and plating up, and it's also going to deal that periodic damage over the course of, I think, about 700 milliseconds is what True Game Data has tested. So that's wildly beneficial as is. However, some players just don't like to use the fire rounds. They do hurt your velocity and your range a little bit, and that's where hollow point would come into play. And this is also really good. Increased limb damage can help out a lot in certain cases for maybe some weapons that are a little bit weaker to some of the extremities. But in either case, really, incendiary or hollow point cannot steer you wrong. Both of those are going to be great for any close range engagements. Now, for the rear grip, this one is about as straightforward as it gets. Polymer is the best choice on every single automatic weapon in the game. The only time I ever use anything that's not polymer is if I'm sniping, and that's when I'd use fabric for the better ADS. But outside of that, the increased recoil that you get during sustained fire is insanely good with polymer. There is zero reason to use any other grip here. You always want to be running that on any ranged weapon, or any close range weapon even, for that increased recoil control. Now, perk 1, this is going to be different again for pretty much every weapon in the game, but there are a few specific perks that you want to look out for. Tight grip is actually one of the best perks in the entire game. The recoil control that this offers during sustained fire is absurd. It is so beneficial to run this, and especially when you pair this with something like the polymer grip and maybe some other barrels that help out with control, you're gonna feel like your weapons are just laser beams and they have no recoil because they're so easy to use because of this. I believe hard scope is another great perk. This is also available on some weapons that basically does the same thing. It's better recoil control during sustained ADS. Basically, any perk that's offering recoil during sustained fire or sustained ADS when you're gonna be using a weapon like that, that's probably what you want to lean towards, specifically for the fact that you want to be able to land your shots consistently. However, there's also a few other good options. Gung Ho on some close range weapons, like if you're trying to build a hipfire AS-44 or a PPSH or a Sten or a Type 100, can be very useful. You're going to negate that sprint to fire time, so you have an instantaneous shot, and that's going to be really good for close range fights, but that's only beneficial for those specific weapons. Obviously, Vital is also pretty useful in some cases. I try to use that if I'm not using a caliber upgrade, just so the fact that I'm not getting too many cons there when it comes down to it. I want to still maintain a good TTK, and Vital, sometimes you have to pick and choose that between that and something like tight grip, for instance. I'd probably go for the recoil control over that, but Vital in certain cases can also be pretty solid. And then on something like the MP40, for instance, if we go up to one of my MP40 classes here, you obviously got a few different options here. Some weapons just don't have great perks. Unmarked is solid for position concealment. If you're using a recoil booster, for instance, and you're not staying off the radar with a suppressor, using unmarked is pretty solid. Also, steady, though, would probably be the best choice if you're using a sub that has, you know, this lesser tier list of perks. Getting that increased ADS firing move speed is pretty solid. So when it comes down to it, I'd recommend Vital, tight grip, hard scope, steady, and unmarked is those main perks you want to look out for. Also, Gung Ho in there as well. And then perk 2, again, I think is very basic. On any main, primary, any ranged weapon, fully loaded. Honestly, on any weapon in the game, fully loaded is going to be your first choice here, I would say. Unless the only time I don't use this is when I'm using an SMG. I like to go for quick there, and I get a better sprint speed, which is nice, just to increase mobility. You like to have that on some of your close range weapons. So if you're using a close range weapon like that, quick is pretty good, but outside of that, no reason to run pretty much anything else here but fully loaded. You might as well get that max ammo, that way you don't have to worry about that. That one's a pretty straightforward and basic one as well. But with all that being said, those are the best attachments I'd say you want to be using in any given category. Obviously, there is some deviation and some differences in specific weapons and what they have offered for barrels, for perks, and whatnot. So definitely be mindful of what else we discussed when it comes to alternatives in some cases. But overall, I feel like Vanguard loadouts, despite having 70 attachments per weapon, are still pretty straightforward, and in a lot of cases are going to be copy and paste. But all that said, that's going to wrap things up for today. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, let me know by dropping a like on it. Would be seriously appreciated. And of course, if you're new here or if you have not already subscribed, this is the best place to be for everything going on in COD. So feel free to subscribe with your notifications turned on. But once again, thank you so much for tuning in. And until next time, take it easy. Have an awesome rest of your day. I'll catch you guys later. Peace out.